You used a word today that you did not define. You did not need to define it. Everyone around you knew what it meant, which means everyone around you had the same understanding of the concept the word refers to, and that shared understanding produced shared behavioral dispositions that would not exist if the word meant something different. That shared understanding was not produced by you. It was produced by the institutions that control the definition of the word. The institutions that have the authority to declare what the word means, whose declarations are accepted as authoritative, and whose definitions are installed as the default understanding in the populations that use the word. In 1976, philosopher Michel Foucault published The History of Sexuality Volume 1, the first volume of what became his most influential examination of the relationship between language, knowledge, and power. Foucault's central methodological contribution in that text was what he called genealogical analysis, the examination of how concepts that feel natural and self-evident were historically produced by specific institutional actors with specific interests, and how those institutionally produced concepts organize the behavior of the populations that hold them. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how semantic control, the institutional control of word definitions, produces behavioral control at scale, which institutions have most effectively operationalized this mechanism, and why controlling the definition of a concept is a more durable form of power than controlling the behavior associated with that concept. You can resist a law. You cannot resist a definition you cannot see as a definition. The semantic field is the cognitive territory that a word organizes, the set of associations, boundaries, values, and behavioral implications that a word activates when it is processed by a speaker who knows the language. The semantic field is not simply the word's dictionary definition. It is the entire cognitive environment that the word constructs, the things it includes and excludes, the values it implies, the behaviors it makes natural, and the behaviors it makes deviant, the social identities it constitutes and the social identities it excludes. Control the semantic field of a word, and you control the cognitive environment within which every user of that word thinks and acts. The institutional mechanisms through which semantic fields are constructed and controlled have been documented across multiple research traditions. Linguist George Lakoff established in his 1987 Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things that semantic fields are structured by conceptual metaphors, deep cognitive frameworks that organize the word's entire meaning field rather than just its definitional core. Philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein established in his 1953 Philosophical Investigations that word meaning is determined by use, by the practices of the community that uses the word, rather than by any fixed definitional core, making the control of semantic fields ultimately a question of controlling the practices of the communities that use the words. The institution that controls the practices of the community that uses a word controls the word's semantic field, and therefore controls the cognitive environment within which every user of the word thinks and acts. The most extensively documented historical case of institutional semantic field control is the medieval church's control of the semantic field of the word heresy. Heresy, in the contemporary English usage, has a relatively benign semantic field. It means something like an unconventional opinion, and the behavioral implications of the word are correspondingly mild. In the medieval church's institutional context, the semantic field of heresy was profoundly different. It referred to a specific category of belief that was simultaneously a theological error, a legal crime, a social contagion, and a threat to salvation. The behavioral implications of the word were correspondingly severe. The identification of a belief as heresy activated institutional responses that included social exclusion, legal prosecution, and, in documented cases, execution. Legal historian R.I. Moore documented in his 1987 The Formation of a Persecuting Society that the medieval church's control of the semantic field of heresy was a more effective instrument of behavioral control than its direct enforcement mechanisms, because the semantic control produced a population that understood heresy, in the church's terms, activated the behavioral responses associated with that understanding automatically. and enforced the Church's definition of heresy on each other without requiring institutional intervention. The semantic field did the institutional work. The definition was the policy. The contemporary institutional semantic field control that has been most extensively documented for its behavioral consequences is the medical profession's control of the semantic fields of health, illness, and normal. Sociologist Peter Conrad documented in his 2007 The Medicalization of Society that the medical profession's control of these semantic fields has expanded continuously since the mid-20th century, with the consequence that an increasing range of human variation in behavior, cognition, and emotional experience has been brought within the semantic field of illness and its associated behavioral implications. Professional consultation, pharmaceutical treatment, institutional management, and the social identity of the patient. The expansion of the semantic field of illness to include attention variation, mood variation, appetite variation, and sexual behavior has not simply changed what conditions are treated medically, it has changed the behavioral dispositions of the populations that understand their experience in medical terms, producing populations that seek professional consultation for experiences that previous generations understood as normal human variation, that accept pharmaceutical management of experiences that previous generations understood as requiring social rather than medical response, and that organize their self-understanding around a medical identity that was not available to previous generations. The semantic field controls the behavior. The professional who controls the semantic field controls the behavior at scale. Here is where the semantic field analysis produces a precise diagnostic for contemporary institutional language. The contemporary institutional actors most actively engaged in semantic field control are the technology industry, the financial industry, and governmental institutions, each of which has developed specific vocabularies whose semantic fields organize the behavioral dispositions of the populations that use them in ways that serve specific institutional interests. Wait, look at the structure again. The technology industry's semantic field control is most visible in the vocabulary of disruption, innovation, and platform. The semantic field of disruption in the technology context carries implications of progressive change, the defeat of outdated incumbents, and the liberation of markets, rather than the field of destabilization, workforce displacement, and market concentration that a neutral description of the same phenomena would activate. The semantic field installed by the technology industry's vocabulary produces behavioral dispositions toward technology deployment, enthusiasm, early adoption, political support, that a different semantic field for the same phenomena would not produce. The financial industry's semantic field control is most visible in the vocabulary of efficiency, market, and risk. The semantic field of efficiency in the financial context carries implications of optimal resource allocation and value maximization, rather than the field of workforce reduction, community destabilization, and the externalization of costs onto non-financial stakeholders that a neutral description of the same phenomena would activate. The semantic field installed by the financial industry's vocabulary produces behavioral dispositions toward financial optimization decisions that a different semantic field for the same phenomena would not produce. The governmental semantic field control we have examined in a previous investigation through the framing device, collateral damage for civilian casualties, enhanced interrogation for torture, is the most explicitly documented category of semantic field control in contemporary institutional practice. The pattern does not stop there. The most consequential contemporary semantic field control is the AI industry's control of the semantic fields of intelligence, learning, and understanding in the context of AI systems. By deploying vocabulary that attributes human cognitive properties, intelligence, learning, understanding, to statistical pattern matching systems, the AI industry has produced a semantic field that activates behavioral dispositions toward AI systems, trust, deference, the extension of authority, that a more accurate vocabulary for the same phenomena would not activate. The semantic field of AI as currently deployed is the most powerful behavioral influence of the contemporary technology sector. It produces the authority deference response in populations that are interacting with systems whose actual properties do not justify that response. If this investigation is worth continuing, signal it. The algorithm reads that as a vote for independent analysis. Here is the applicable lens. The semantic field diagnostic requires one specific practice. For any word that carries strong behavioral implications, that makes some behaviors feel natural and others feel deviant, ask who controls the definition of the word, what institutional interests are served by the specific semantic field the controlling institution has established, and what a different semantic field for the same phenomena would look like. The alternative semantic field exercise is the most powerful component of the diagnostic. Identify a word in your professional, political, or personal vocabulary whose semantic field carries strong behavioral implications, and construct an alternative description of the same phenomena that does not use the word. The alternative description will reveal what the word's semantic field is including, excluding, implying, and naturalizing that a different description would not. The behavioral implications of the alternative description, the different dispositions it would produce, reveal the behavioral work that the original word's semantic field is doing. That work is institutional. The institution that controls the definition is the institution that installed the behavioral disposition in every user of the word. The next video in this investigation will show you exactly how three specific contemporary institutional vocabularies, the AI industry's cognitive vocabulary, the financial industry's efficiency vocabulary, and the technology industry's disruption vocabulary, are constructing semantic fields that produce specific behavioral dispositions in the populations that use them, and what alternative descriptions of the same phenomena reveal about the behavioral work those semantic fields are performing. Subscribe so you are there when it publishes. The question is not whether controlling the definition of a word controls behavior at scale. Foucault's genealogical analysis, Lakoff's conceptual metaphor research, Moore's heresy semantic field documentation, and Conrad's medicalization research all confirm that it does. The question is which words in your vocabulary are controlled by institutions whose definitions are serving their interests rather than yours. This investigation was produced with AI-assisted research tools and human editorial oversight. All claims are grounded in documented historical and institutional sources. Transparency is part of the methodology.